Good morning, another good early morning to you. I am again in the big smoke working, and so I've got to do this one early in the morning again. But that's all right. I don't mind doing that. I've got caffeine, getting the caffeine into the system, so it's happening. So, welcome back, or welcome for the first time if you haven't been here before. This is the SitRep, or the situation report for today, which is the 8th of July 2022. And this is where I go through news stories and we pull them apart from the perspective of prepping. On Instagram, thank you for following along there. On the YouTubes, and I'm even giving this a crack recording the audio and might try uploading it to the Spotify, because I've had a couple of requests by people who just want to listen to the smooth dose of tones of my voice and not necessarily look at this going on. I don't know if you're really getting much if you're looking at the video of this. It doesn't really add anything to it. Anyway, that's not what the point of this is. The point of this is to go through stories that I found interesting over the past 24 hours, which I will do now. So a number of stuff, different stories came out. Obviously, Boris Johnson stepped down as PM, or will step down as PM. He hasn't done it yet, but he's said he's going to. So, I mean, I've talked about the UK political situation a couple of times. I just want to touch on it this morning because it's obviously big news and all the mainstream media is going to be talking about it. So I'll just acknowledge it. Yes, that's happened. I don't see it as anything outside of what's been happening, the trend that we've been seeing, that we've been getting increased turmoil within all political systems, all countries, where we're getting this more up and down. This is a right-wing or more conservative government. I shouldn't call it right-wing, because right-wing and conservatism doesn't necessarily align anymore. When people talk right and left, I think that has actually dislinked from liberal and conservative thinking. But generally, when we say this sort of terms, we're thinking right side of politics means conservative. We've had a period over the last 10 years of predominantly conservative governments, and now we're getting the pendulum swing. So the US has now gone the other side. Australia has just gone the other side, and now we see Bojo stepping down. UK might be shifting that way as well. That's just the way the cookie crumbles, I guess. That's the way it goes. People like this thing, then they go, no, we don't like that thing. We like this thing. Now I'm on this team. Now I'm on this team. It's just the usual blah, blah, blah that's happening there. But more turmoil within the political sphere that we're seeing this morning. And that shows us a bigger trend of what's actually happening in the world at the moment, or I believe what's happening in the world at the moment. The fragility of our systems is being exposed. The turmoil is starting to increase, and people are starting to actually force or put pressure enough for certain parties to step down. We've had coups happen. We've had governments overthrown in the past month or two. And like this very developed country, APM standing down. So there's that. Okay. But anyway, I'm not going to talk about that much this morning because I don't really care. The guy just looks weird to me as well. I don't know if anyone agrees with me on that, but just looks like a weirdo. All right, I'm going to talk about what I think is probably the biggest news to me this morning, is looking at the World War III sort of picture that's shaping up, and the dodgeball teams that are getting picked at the moment. So the G20 summit is ramping up, which is happening in Bali, for those who haven't had their head around that. MI5 and the FBI. So MI5 is the UK version of FBI, I guess. And FBI is the US version of the FBI. Very funny. They've come out. They've both delivered a joint release here, saying that they're very worried about China. In fact, they put out what they call an extreme warning, an extreme China warning, which, like, I saw that and I was like, wow, that's That's pretty strong. That's a pretty strong indicator that we can see now where the world is starting to gear up. And I've said this a couple of times now that we've been Ukraine saturated, and we're just watching everything that US does at the moment. And like I always try and say, don't necessarily listen to what people say, but also think about why they're saying it, why are they releasing this sort of information, and then look at what they do. And if we look at what the US is doing, they seem to be very rapidly, yep, they're pouring money into the Ukraine, but they're almost like throwing money at it and distancing themselves, because they're very clearly shifting their focus now into the Pacific and towards China. And they're dragging their mates along with them. So they're going, hey, come on, UK, let's go, let's get into this. They don't have to ask Australia to get into this. Clearly, we're on the coattails of the US when it comes to this, in the anti-China sentiment. And we've been forming our own alliances as well, outside of the US alliances, but mainly with the US alliances. There's several of them now that are up and operating. And it's just gearing towards the same thing. So they're saying, yep, China's a big problem. Europe has come out the day before, and said again, Russia is the biggest threat to Europe. And so, yeah, what we're seeing now is that shift towards China. This is both coming out of Reuters. So Reuters was reporting on this, and news.com.au. So I'm not getting this from backwards, conspiracy theory channels. This is mainstream media stuff that they're reporting on. And again, if I take the analysis look at this, and I take the step back and I think, why are they reporting on it? Why is mainstream media caught onto this one? I mean, the mainstream media has been reporting about Chinese sort of stuff for a little while now, but it's just interesting that a lot of the mainstream media simultaneously said, hey, MI5 and FBI have come out and put this. It doesn't make a lot of sense from a straightforward warfare stance for organizations like the FBI or MI5 to come out and be releasing these press statements saying we have to be worried about China, except for the obvious fact that this is clearly propaganda. This is gearing all of us up, gearing the sheeple, gearing all human beings up towards a war setting. And that's what's happening. They're trying to push us into a war footing at the moment. I mean, they're not trying, they are doing it. And we will, I think, go into that state at some stage. We're going to cross that line and be like, oh, hey, we're at war now. Where did that come from? Other indications from this too, if we look at what's happening on the other side. So Russia yesterday have moved into a war footing. So their economy is shifting into a war economy, which comes on with a whole heap of other laws and things like that. So basically, when you've got a mass emergency or a war or something like that, and the government designates it, then the freedom for companies to do what companies should be doing, which is just making money and producing goods or services or whatever, that becomes hampered severely. Obviously, I'm looking at this from my libertarian perspective, but essentially, it gives an avenue for the government to say, "Hey, we need you to make this at no profit and give it to us. Do that now." So Russia has come out and pretty much admitted that that's what they're doing now, which is interesting because previously, Russia has only been in a basically something extended above a military maneuver, an action. They have been very, very adamant within the Russian space. So what they're telling their own public, and obviously this is what I'm getting from Russian propaganda. So I'm looking at the Russian propaganda sources, and they're saying, no, this is just a military maneuver where we're helping free the people of the Donbass region or wherever out of Ukraine. So all of a sudden they've come out and they said, hey, we're ramping it up. And they, in the past 48 hours, have hit the go button in Russia. And now they haven't said the W word, but they're basically doing all the things to tell their public we're at war now. This is a war. We're going to need more effort. We're going to need more from you. We're going to need more from our companies. We're going to need more, because this is an actual war. So I saw that and I'm like, okay, that's interesting. But, maybe that's just the way they're grinding it out over there. Then in conjunction with these other news stories that I'm seeing the propaganda from the West side. So our Western propaganda machine is clearly ramped up and in full brainwash mode. Hypnotoad is out there for the sheeple, spreading the good message of how the Anglosphere is going to have to fight the good fight against the red hordes. The rise of the red once more is here. On the other side of this MI5 FBI release, we have Lavrov, the foreign minister for Russia, has come out and said he's basically saying, look how good, or he's saying like, how awesome is this Russian-Chinese it's called the Russian-Chinese Constructive Strategic Joint Work. That's a mouthful. And he wasn't just saying how good is it. He's going, it's very important that we have this, and I want to get this wording right, to confront blatantly aggressive West. So that's essentially how they're working now. We're seeing that Russia-China alliance become more and more formal every day. And what they are doing is saying, look at all the things the West are doing. Because the West is doing things, because we have releases like this from the FBI and MI5, which then Russia can go, what a great excuse. We'll use that to form this alliance or deepen this alliance, to build up more military might, to start doing this, to start posturing ourselves in a certain way. So this is like totally a chicken and egg situation. And one thing is just going to feed into the other, because now the West is going to look at that and go, see, we were right to release that media release. Look at what they're doing. Yep. Well, we're going to have to step it up again. They are. It's not even marching us into war at the moment. Like they've broken out into a jog. They're not sweating yet, but they're not marching. They've like tripped over and they're like, yep, okay, we're going into it. We're doing this. So watch this space, because this is going to increase in speed, is my prediction. Again, with any of the things that I put out here, I try and tell you what's my thoughts and ideas on it and what's actually just what I'm seeing in the media. But that's my predictions. We're going to see this start to increase over the next couple of weeks, exacerbated or maybe confounded by some other factors that are going to come flying in at us. Two of the big ones being the monkeypox and the corona shenanigans that are happening at the moment. So we're still seeing this monkeypox being pushed a little bit. I think it hit like 600 cases or something in the US. To me, this is a really funny situation. I just want to explain this. I love when, and I'll just call it like the sort of the left, but like the PC culture sort of thing, when it gets caught in its own trap. So it creates this space where it's like, no, everyone has to be safe and you can't say bad things. Nobody can say bad things, okay? So that's the rule. And then they need to say something and they go, oh, but hang on, that's a bad thing. But we need to say it, but we can't. And that's what's happening at the moment. This monkeypox thing, there's a clear subsection of the population that appears to be getting infected with it. And it's a homosexual population. And like, I've got zero against any people that choose to be homosexual. That's fine. It's just the media won't report on it because it's seen as being offensive. I'm like, it's not offensive. Okay. If there's a certain type of people that are maybe they're not more prone, but they're more, this disease is more prolific within that subset of the population, then it kind of behooves us to let them know that so that they can take appropriate action against it. But what I'm seeing in the media is they're like, we've got this thing and it's bad. And we're like, cool, why isn't it spreading like wildfire, or why is it just in this community, or what's happening here? We don't know yet. You do know, we're just not saying it. So it's really interesting thing where they're actually caught in their own little trap there. But yeah, the monkeypox thing, we've got that going on in Australia. I've seen a couple of mainstream media stuff coming out in Australia. And I was talking to some friends about this last night, that going back, like tracking the news, they started talking about fourth shot, fourth injection. uptake was not good. The uptake was not good in Australians, and from some polls and some sort of Vox votes and things like that of the population, it didn't look like Aussies were like that into it. We were just like, we're a bit over this. Fourth, don't think so. I mean, some people, there's parts of Australia that are like 4, 5, 6. Can I get an 8th? Like, keep them coming. I'll take one every day. But a lot of Australians were apparently starting to wane on it and were going, you know what, it doesn't really matter. And then we saw that start to go down, the uptake go down. Then the new variant came out, the new variant. Actually, there's a couple of new variants. And in fact, they're very complicated and we can't really explain it too much, but variant on top of variant with a variant inside a variant. And that started getting pumped. So I've watched over the past 4 days now, the increasing intensity in which our mainstream media is pumping the new wave of COVID, alongside with, by the way, we've got a 4th shot. So I'm not saying that, they're pumping this up in order to drive people into that 4th shot, but some things are pretty self-evident to me. That's what I believe when I'm looking at this sort of picture here. Anyway, the story I saw this morning on mainstream media was about the big hospital in Brisbane having to stop all elective surgery because they're overwhelmed. And again, it's COVID. Look, medical systems getting overwhelmed. Yes, COVID is a factor, but it's like saying that the food supply shortage is Putin's fault. Yes, that's a factor, but there are so many other factors. It's not like our medical system was running at 100% in 2019. It was struggling in 2019. It was underfunded. The people who worked there were working way too hard, way too long hours for not enough pay. And the system was falling apart already. Then we got a pandemic and it's like, what a convenient excuse that now we can say, it's because of COVID. It's not because of COVID. It's because of a whole heap of other things. In fact, my shtick on this is our health system is overloaded because so many people don't take their own responsibility of their health. That's probably one of the big things. What was our health system overloaded from? Non-communicable diseases, people being unfit, people being unhealthy, people not eating correctly in a healthy manner. So that's what I think on that. The hospitals, we're just going to get hammered with this. Anyway, these are confounding factors. The point of what I was talking about here with the pandemic sort of stuff is confounding factors for this warlike footing that we're getting pushed into right now. Jonathan Stratus asks, do you think there will be another lockdown? I think there is a possibility of another lockdown within Australia, within certain states within Australia, at least. I don't think it will work out well though. I think if they go into lockdown again, it will either be relatively ignored and pushed over, as in people will just go, nah, fuck this, we're just going to go do what we're going to do, or it will be violently opposed in some form that will see a marked increase in civil unrest at that point. That will be the thing, I think, for Australians, where we will see violent protests. I've said this before, on a global scale, we're going to see more civil unrest across the world. However, Australia, in my perspective of somebody who has traveled around the world and been in war zones and been in riots and been with, taking journalists into these sorts of areas for a number of years now and taught people about this stuff, teach this stuff on courses. The way I look at Australia is if we had a ranking system, if there was an Olympics for civil disorder or for protests or for riots, Australia would be right down near the bottom. We are shit at protesting. We are absolutely hopeless at it. Our protests are generally pathetic. Every now and then, one kicks up and gets quite big. Certainly during COVID, during lockdowns and things like that, we had some much larger, much more organized and even at points much more violent civil unrest events. But on the whole, we're pretty bad at it. And things like food shortages or increases in food price, it's not the sort of thing that's going to drive Australians out into the streets at this point, and probably not within this year, I would say. However, a lockdown quite possibly could. Quite possibly could. And Jonathan says, I think that's what they want. That's possible. That's a possibility. That's what they're gearing towards. All right, so that's the war thing that's happening. What else we got going on? So I was having a chat here. This was kind of a sort of a three-way chat between that Insta chick and arriving somewhere with Matt on the Instagrams. Arriving somewhere with Matt is he's a New Zealand cuzzy bro. Really cool, funny dude. If you haven't seen his stuff, go check it out. He does some really funny stuff. Anyway, he sent me some information from what's happening in New Zealand. I reported on this a little while ago about how they were shutting down their last oil refinery. So they were saying, hey, we're going to shut down the oil refinery. We're not going to actually refine any oil in New Zealand anymore. And I've talked about Australia, and our ability to refine oil is almost gone. So we had quite a good ability at one stage to refine oil, and we kept on shutting down those refineries. And now it's teetering on the edge of us going this way as well. So that means that we have to import all fuel products from overseas, generally like in that sort of Singapore type areas where we're getting it from. But we're just outsourcing all of that. And we've increased our reliance on outsourcing or importing in refined oil products, which is obviously increasing vulnerability. And at this stage in history, considering what's going on and supply chains right now, I think is utter madness. I cannot make it, yes, I get the financial sense of it, but countries right now, and especially countries like Australia, which are dislocated, we have no land borders with anyone else. We should be running hand over fist. Hand over fist. We should be running absolutely crazily towards a self-reliant country, or moving towards this sort of self-reliance where we should be manufacturing our own stuff here as much as possible. We can't do everything, but as much as possible, we should be trying to manufacture within our own country. We should be trying to pull the things out of our own country, those resources out of our own country, refine them, manufacture them here, and sell them here and overseas. That's what we should be doing, and that's not what we're doing at all. We're moving towards the opposite. Anyway, back onto New Zealand with their oil refineries. What's happening there? Now, this was next level mind-blowing to me, where I'm just like, the madness of what's happening in the world today is just increasing. So, New Zealand only oil refinery, which just got shut down, they also had its pipes filled with concrete. So it's totally unusable now. If they wanted to turn that back on, they can't do it. They can't do it. They've effectively destroyed their ability to refine oil now, which just seems like madness. I'm like, wouldn't you just hedge your bets here? Close it down, sure, and see how things work by importing oil. But just have that resource there for a couple of years even. Just have it there for 2-3 years. It can't cost that much to just have it sitting there. Maybe a little bit of maintenance or something like that. But to actually destroy it like this, to fill it full of concrete, the pipes full of concrete, which would make it utterly unusable and would have to be scrapped and rebuilt in order for it to work again. So this is a quote that I got sent. There is no fuel security issue with the move to a full import model. And so there is no case to be made to declare the refinery a national strategic asset. That's from the New Zealand Energy Minister. Well, I don't know what to say. If you look at that and go well, yeah, I can kind of make sense, then I don't know what to say to you, honestly. If anyone's looking at that and going, yeah, but they probably had a reason to, no, this makes no sense. And there can only be one outcome from this. or one underlying theme here is that there is an agenda going on here, and that's what they're moving towards. To say that your ability to refine oil within your own country is not a strategic asset tells me that you either know some information that the rest of us don't, that oil is done and that you're sitting on some sort of like free energy machine, like you can use orgone energy out of the atmosphere and you're just about to drop it on us all, or like a new type of solar panel that can somehow magically create more energy than it actually receives from the sun. I don't know what it is, but please let the rest of us know about it, because right now the world I'm looking at is still woefully dependent on fossil fuels and will be for years to come. There is no getting around that, and that is painfully obvious as we are seeing with the current energy crisis. There is absolutely no way for us to continue the world we have on anything but fossil fuels with the technologies we currently have. And if there are other magic technologies out there, please drop it on us. Please let us know. Like, ease the pain of the world right now. There are Germans who are starting to get a bit chilly and taking cold showers and can't even get hot water out of their taps right now. So I don't know what the thinking is here, but yeah, watch that space. Okay, what else is happening here? India's rupee USD low is at a USD low and trade deficit record. So a trade deficit on a very, very irresolute scale, or like my sort of 3-year-old crayon mind scale, is essentially import-export. If you've got a deficit, it means you kind of have to import more than you export. So you're going to be running at a loss. That's probably the easiest way to put this. India's is just hit a record. So they're not in a good state. Their rupee is going down against the dollar, and it's at one of its lowest points that it's ever been. So India is looking a bit shaky. What does that matter? Yeah, I'm always talking about this part of the world, that we've just seen what's happening right now in Sri Lanka. Pakistan is at that verge, or is in a state of collapse too, just not quite in the state of collapse that Sri Lanka is. And Bangladesh is there as well. Then we've got India here, and it's easy just to write this sort of stuff off and go, that's another country, that's far away, I don't care. India's got 1.4 billion people in it. You should start to care. Like, that's a pretty big deal. When a country collapses with 1.4 billion people, you can guarantee there's going to be ramifications felt all throughout the world. I can't predict exactly what they would be, but at the very least, there would be mass migration. Huge amount of migration would come out from India. So that's something to watch as well. That's interesting, isn't it? Let's talk about some nuclear energy. South Korea is revamping a push for nuclear energy to meet its emission targets. So the big, bad, green, glowing Hulk known as nuclear energy, the gamma rays, which has been demonized for quite a long time and, isn't the perfect solution to the world's problems. However, right now, I think a lot of governments are starting to look at what's going on, and they're actually realizing that all the hopes and dreams and unicorn farts and rainbows that they thought the world could be isn't actually real. And the world, the kind of leftist green agenda, is starting to rub up against what I like to call a little thing called reality. Ooh, and it's hurting. It's a bit owie for them. And they're like, oh, but I don't want to do fossil fuels, and I want green energies. And we're like, cool, you can have green energies. However, there's a consequence for that. Okay, cool. What's the consequence? Well, for starters, we won't have enough energy for everyone. Oh, okay, that's bad. Okay, what else? We won't be able to make as much food. Right, okay, which means people will die and starve and start going crazy and do things like riots and destroy our own country and probably rip you out of the government and lynch you. Right. Okay. That's less good. I don't really like that idea. Is there anything else that could happen? Yes, a whole ramp of things. Actually, everything. Society will pretty much collapse. Okay, cool. Well, do we have any other options then? Nuclear. So a lot of countries now are starting to pull the nuclear cat out of the bag and are really starting to dust off those plans and go, can we go nuclear? Can we get nuclear energy back on the table? Which is all this is interesting too, because especially in Europe and in Western Europe, so we're talking France, Germany, that sort of area, they have had and UK, they have been systemically shutting down the nuclear power facilities for probably about 10, 15 years now, or at least working towards it. Interestingly, they haven't actually been able to shut down some of these plants because they can't deal with the shortfall of energy, the energy crisis that it would have created. So they've got plants there that should have been decommissioned 10, 15, 20 years ago that are still running, and they're going to have to shut them down and in order to refit them and refurb them and do all that sort of stuff. But on top of that, if they want energy that's not fossil fuel reliant, they're probably going to have to build a bunch more of these nuclear reactors as well. So who knows? The Fallout series of video games could quite well become reality very soon, where we're all using nuclear energy for a cleaner, brighter future. But I just thought it was interesting. South Korea is also doing it as well. So I think that's where we're heading at the moment. I don't see a lot of other choices. Long, hard, cold winters and mass die-offs, or nuclear energy. That's kind of what governments are starting to juggle with at the moment. That's what they're starting to think. All right, South Africa. Winter of discontent in Johannesburg. That's a clever little title. This is coming out of the Russian propaganda machine. South Africa gripped by energy crisis. Thousands are planning to flee the country as power cuts wreak havoc in homes and roads across the country. It's made commuting near impossible, and small businesses can't cope with unemployment skyrocketing. So to stop a complete collapse of the power grid, the country's national power provider has been cutting supply to various cities. The crisis comes amidst illegal strikes from workers and corruption at the very top of the energy giant. So yeah, some of this reporting is coming via Russian propaganda, but it's also coming via BBC to them. So they're just reporting on stories that BBC was putting out. So again, another country gripped with energy crises. Huge problems here. Where is this all heading? Not to a good place. And like I said, with the nuclear sort of thing here, countries are going to start to have to make really tough decisions at this point. One of those tough decisions I think a lot of countries are going to have to make is admitting to the fact that a lot of that energy that they were using was coming out of Russia, and that they sanctioned Russia, and so as a result of doing that, have punished themselves. A lot of countries are going to have to actually look at that fact, and that if they want to alleviate the issue, even for a small point of time, they're going to have to go back to Russia. And the terms are not going to be good. At this point, the terms are not going to be good for them. Hey, Kieran, how you doing? So, yeah. Let's jump over to California now. California wildfires. So this heat wave, this huge heat wave and drought that's been smashing the western part of the US is now bordering on a real state of emergency. Like this is a real crisis, considering the amount of water that they do not have, considering that water also gets converted into electricity, which they're not going to have, but also these fires. So probably unsurprisingly, after July the 4th, fireworks, drought-like conditions, we've got fires. So overnight, thousands of people have been evacuated from certain areas. We're looking at the Amador County, which I'm not sure where in California that is. But they've had thousands of people evacuated. Quite a big deal. Obviously, being an Australian, we've seen this 2 years ago with the huge bushfires that we had, and we had thousands of people evacuated. We had people who had to get evacuated on coastal towns via Navy and military assets because they literally were pushed into the sea. So these sorts of events are quite huge. They're quite serious. These are things that we also need to consider, and that's why I always like to bring up these ones. From that prepping perspective, imagine overnight, right now you have to evacuate. Your house is probably going to get destroyed. All your goods are going to get destroyed. What do you want on you? Do you have a grab bag? Do you have ability to move, to get out of there? These are all the sorts of things that you want to consider, because it can become reality very, very quickly. What's happening in Taiwan? Taiwan, this one was an interesting one. We've got a lot of role playing. We've got a lot of cosplaying in Taiwan at the moment. Apparently, a lot of their well-to-do Taiwanese residents, is how it was put, are taking up lessons in urban warfare. So dressing up as, this is coming from Russian propaganda, so they were really concentrating on the Russian part of it. Apparently they've been buying up like military fatigues and stuff like that and kind of playing cosplay. But there's actually people who are cashing in on this and teaching people urban warfare drills and stuff like that to executives and former army professionals and things like that. And people are shelling out money for it. Taiwanese are worried, obviously, that China's going to come and invade their country. The average citizen's like, hey, I don't know what to do. I'm going to start gearing up, learning how to fight some guerrilla tactics and things like that. This piqued my interest because I'm like, I teach this kind of stuff, not guerrilla tactics and stuff to civilians, but like that's certainly within the scope of things that I could do. And I'm wondering, like, at what point as Australians are we going to be like, maybe we need to start learning some warfare. And I'm a big believer, a big proponent that every human being should know how to defend themselves to at least some extent. So I believe that most human beings should actually not only have the opportunity and the ability to do this, but should go out and actually, teach yourself things like how to conduct some sort of operation, how to defend yourself and your community and your family. So I think this is a cool thing. Fun times over there. The other part of this that I think is interesting, though, that if you recall back to, I want to say January, February this year, it was all throughout the news. Civilians in Ukraine being trained up how to fight. Now we're seeing civilians in Taiwan being trained how to fight. It's happening. Kieran says China wants their computer chips plan. Yep. For those who don't know, semiconductor computer chips, Taiwan is like the world leader in producing these key technologies, which it still boggles my mind. I'm like, how as a world did we go, it's a good idea for one small island to produce something that is a key component, an absolute key component to almost all of the running of our modern world? Why did we not diversify this? How did that occur? Anyway, that's where we're at. Dutch supermarkets are literally out of food. So a couple of stories here, which this is one that I couldn't verify. It's just coming in from Twitter, quoting apparently some a news source within the Netherlands. But they were saying Dutch supermarkets are literally out of food. Hungry men have no respect for law, authority, or human life. This better end positively soon, or all hell's going to break loose, from whatever Twitter handle this was. But yeah, I mean, a couple of things with this. I don't know if it's true or not. I'm sure that the farming protests that are going on at the moment would certainly be having impacts on the movement of food. I mean, the production of food, but the movement of food, because they're blocking off highways and things like that. So supply chains would also be impacted, and in an already impacted supply chain, this would be exacerbating that problem. So maybe some of the Dutch supermarkets are running out of food, and that's how it can happen. That's how easily these sorts of things can happen. In Netherlands, this is not some poor backwater country. This is a developed country. This is one of the most developed countries on the face of the earth. That's why I always like to point out these things. As Aussies, we sort of think like, yeah, we're fine. We'll be right. To a certain extent, yeah, we will be right. She'll be right. But sometimes she will not be right. Sometimes things go wrong. And even on a small scale, we could lose food for a day, 2 days. Doesn't really matter. Like this person rightly puts, hungry men have no respect for law, authority, or human life. I have seen that firsthand. It is absolutely true. Society is only ever 3 square meals away from collapse. So if you want to avoid that anarchy, keep feeding your people, which, in this point in history seems to be getting harder and harder. But you can avoid that anarchy by having your own food, having your own supermarket within your own house. This is not my house, by the way. This is a hotel room. But stockpile food. Stockpile food. AIM had a question come in the other day. How much should you stockpile? What you should be aiming for? How many months? And I said, how long's a piece of string? But if you have 24 hours worth of food on hand, then you're probably doing it better than a bunch of people out there. If you've got 3 days of food in your house, you're probably doing better than like at least half of human beings out there. If you've got 3 months or 3 weeks, you're probably better than 85% of people out there. Which means that you don't then have to contend with 85% of the population who are scared, hungry, and aggressive out there trying to get food, battling for resources. If you've got 3 months worth of food, I would say you're better than 95%. And I would actually really say probably about 98% of the population out there. If you've got 3 months in your house, or in reality, probably 99 point something percent. But that means that if there's no food in the supermarket for whatever reason, you don't have to freak out. You don't have to leave your home and go and battle with other people or stand in line for hours and hours and hours to get food rationing tickets, or you don't have to sign up to some QR code app that the government will give you a ration when you get to the end of the line that you've been standing in for 8 hours, just so that you can feed your family. You don't have to do that. You can literally shut your door and eat and feed your family for the next 3 months. That's a good target, round target. I usually say a couple of months worth of food, even if you have to stretch it out. Okay, you can ration yourself, but ideally 3 months worth of 3 square meals a day, keeping those calories up. Because if that is happening, you're in an emergency situation. If you're in an emergency situation, you're probably going to be using more calories anyway, and you're probably going to need everything that you can. You're going to need all the resources that you can. So you want your body operating and your mind operating at its absolute highest function that it can. It's not going to do that if you're starving it slowly, if you're rationing food. So 3 good months worth of food is a good aiming mark. And then I like to say, and then start to extend it from there. If you can reach for 6 months, well, 3 to 6 months is a good time period as far as I'm concerned, because in 3 to 6 months, if I've got 3 to 6 months of food on store in my house, I can use that time then to start building systems. I can really ramp the gardening, or if I haven't already, I can start gardening. I can think about, okay, how do I access other food? How do I start to create connections within the community and other people and trade things and stuff like that for food? How do I get my gardens bigger, better, badder? How do I create other gardens outside of that area? How do I go out hunting? How do I have livestock? Blah, blah, blah. I can do that over 3 to 6 months. But if I have zero food and I'm trying to do that and I'm slowly starving, it's not going to work out. But if I'm eating and I'm being, conscious about what I'm doing, I can be relaxed. And then I'm not going to freak out if 3 of my tomato plants die. I'm like, okay, three of the tomato plants didn't work. That's okay. Let's try again, or try with something else. What did I do wrong? So that's what we want to be aiming for. Also, just another side note, another fire. A fire of unknown origin decimated a pig farm and killed nearly 1,200 animals. No humans were hurt. So we've still got humans to eat, so that's good. In the same county, 2 other fires broke out at the same time earlier on that day, but few details were given. This is in Quebec, in Canada. Quebec, Canada is not going to affect any Australians or New Zealanders, but just yet another example of a fire in a food plant manufacturer farm. Again, like, this is like beyond the point of ridiculous now. And if you don't think that there is something going on, I don't know what to say. I'm like, even me, like, I like to think of myself as relatively anti-conspiratorial theorist. I'm even like, this is pretty obvious what's going on here. Food farms are being attacked. I don't know by whom, but they're definitely being targeted. It is utterly, like, way beyond a joke now. The interesting part of this for me, though, is what I would have assumed would have happened is food manufacturing plants, farms, processing plants, whatever it is, supply chains, everything, get attacked. People look at that and go, okay, when something gets attacked, there's a reaction and you build defense. Or maybe this is just my military mind. You build defense around that, okay? You get defense and you build a fence. No, you get defensive structures or systems built up around that. I'm not seeing any of that at all. In fact, I'm seeing a blind eye turn to this, where people are like, oh, it's another fire. Okay, like governments are looking and going, oh, another farm has gone up or another food manufacturer has gone up. Okay, anyway, good luck, farmers. By the way, not only are we not going to help you out, farmers, or even admit that there might be a problem here, we're going to do other policies that are going to make it harder for you to operate. And we're going to increase prices we're going to do policies that increase prices on diesel fuel, which is the main thing you use to farm. And we're going to give you energy shortages. It's like, I do not consider myself a farmer because I allow way too many plants to die. But one day I would like to consider myself a farmer, or there's a part of me that goes, yeah, there's a dream there that you'd like to be a farmer. If I was an actual farmer for a job right now, man, this is probably the people that I feel the most sympathy or empathy for right now is farmers. Like, they're doing it tough, real hard. And on top of that, shit's getting burnt down. I don't know, maybe there's farmers doing it themselves for insurance. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's vegans attacking pig farms. And then just seeing an opportunity of crisis right now, and they're going, now's a good time. Now's a good time to do this. I don't know. Maybe it's the Illuminati. But it is disturbing and it should worry you. It should worry you. It should concern you. There should be a little bit of fear within you. And like I always say, that fear should be used then to motivate you towards doing something. Get up off your ass and do something. You need to be growing your own food. We need to be bringing our food systems back closer to our own homes. And if we can, in our own homes. We need to be digging up parts of our lawn. Even though, grass is lovely and you can sit on it, have a picnic on it, you can't eat the grass. So we need to be digging that stuff up and planting stuff now. Planting, or at least if you're like me and you're in the frigid cold, I think it might have got to -1 this morning. There's still things I can plant, but mainly I'm creating the spaces and building up resources. So when spring hits, I'm like, boom, 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 let's do this. And I'm going to explode that garden when spring comes in. But that's still months away for me. But rather than waiting for spring to come and then going like, yes, now I'm going to start building a garden. Now I'm going to buy things when everyone else is buying things. I'm going to try and do it now. So that's what we should be doing. As always, gardening. Get into the gardens. All right, that's it for today. So yeah, my last couple of stories were the stories that I started off with. China, Russia, forming an alliance, going to take over the world. The West, going to try and fight it. If you're worried about that, start thinking about how to fight wars. Get yourself battle ready. Get a 15 to 20 kilo bag, put it on your back, and go walk 15 Ks. That's a good start. No, start building up systems within yourself, within your own house, within your own communities. As always, start trying to garden, start stockpiling food, start dealing with local farmers if you can. Start making those connections now. Start encouraging other people to do it, and even pay other people for their veggies, for their crops, for their meat, whatever it is. If they're hunters and they say, hey, we've got some meat, buy some meat off them. If they're farmers and they go, oh, we just butchered some goats, buy some goats off them. Or we've got goat milk, cow milk, buy that off them. Encourage people to do this, because that will mean that they will ramp that up and they will continue to do it. And then when the other systems that we have, which are failing, fail even more, we'll have our systems in place. So that's it for today. Hopefully there was something in there that helped you out. As always, keep your eyes open, keep looking out, keep safe out there, keep prepping, keep stockpiling food, keep doing all those good things. And until next time, Semper Paratus.